Made with love by Clover.
Welcome back and thank you for staying tuned, South Africa. Now, if you're looking to add an instant wow factor to your dinner party, then our Clover Bliss profiteroles are exactly what you need. We add an indulgent twist using our Clover Bliss chocolate medium cream dairy dessert and fill our pastries with vanilla ice cream because it's a dream with ice cream. Now, to get started, South Africa, a lot of you might have been wondering what exactly are profiteroles? What are these things? How can I make them? In simple terms, it's basically cream puffs. Cream puffs are like a nice crispy little dough that's made on the outside and nice and indulgent on the inside. And it basically requires 5 ingredients. We've got some eggs, we've got flour, we've got some butter and water. You can use milk if you prefer, but I always like to keep it original and classic with some water and just a little bit of salt just to add that additional flavor. To start it off, I've got my pot that's been warmed up here and I add some butter to this. If you'd want to use a different fat, I'd say maybe you can go as far as coconut oil, but it is always best to use butter because of the fact that because of the creaminess that is in there. So I always prefer butter, and because of the fat content that is in there. I've also got a pot of oil that's heating up over here, but I'll tell you about that a little later. So to start it off, like I mentioned, I've got my butter that's melting up. The whole idea is to get the butter to melt down until once it's like halfway melted, then we add all the other ingredients. This basically is a choux pastry. This is what we're making. We're starting it off from scratch with our ingredients. The butter's almost melted here. I'm going to go in with some water. Don't have to worry about whether ingredients are at room temperature or cold because it's all going to go into the same pot anyway. But basically, yeah, so I've got some water, some of our butter. I'm going to go in with a pinch of salt, not too much. Let that dissolve fully, and it is important to make sure you use a wooden spoon. Do not use a whisk because one, you might break your whisk because of the kind of consistency we're going for with this dough. You want something that basically is able to mix all the ingredients together. So once the butter is melted fully, we will then go in with the rest of the ingredients. I also have eggs over here, and one thing I have to mention is when making choux pastry, it is always important to add the eggs one by one because depending on whatever size of eggs you're using, you might find that you might need to use fewer eggs than what the recipe requires. So in this instance, if you can just watch my pot here, it's starting to bubble at the sides. We basically want the water to bubble away as well. Once that starts happening, we're going to add our flour into the mixture. As you can see now, our water is already bubbling away. This is the perfect time to start adding our flour, but I also will turn the water, or rather the heat down, because we don't want to burn the mixture that we're going to be putting in here. Your flour goes in all at once. You don't have to worry about adding it a little bit at a time because all we basically want here is for the flour to cook down and for this mixture to come together as a dough. So if you can watch the pot here, you see it starts off as a complete mixture that's just all over the place. And as you keep mixing, I've turned down the heat completely. It basically forms a ball now. It's now become one full ball. Everything is starting to come from it's coming from the sides. It's no longer sticking to the sides. And now all we're going to do is we're going to start adding our eggs. As you can see, I've also removed it from the heat. The reason for that is we're going to start adding our eggs. Once we start adding our eggs, we don't want them to cook. So you can see how our dough looks. This is where we want it to be. We don't want it to be more than this. We don't want it to be less than this. We don't want it to be crumbly. It has to be a dough. So most people would suggest that you let the dough cool down. But because I've been doing this for quite some time, I would suggest that you do that as well. Let the dough cool down before you start adding your eggs. But because I have been doing this for quite some time now, I'm not going to let that happen because I also want to show you exactly how these steps work. So I'm going to start adding our eggs one at a time. I'm going to break in one of our eggs here. And then I just want to show you here, as you can see, as I'm folding everything together, the eggs are not cooking and I'm making sure to move as quickly as possible because what we want is we want the egg to be fully incorporated into the dough before we add the next one. If you don't mix it in, one, the egg is going to cook. Two, you're also going to get that eggy texture and you don't want that. You want everything to come together and combine fully before you add the next egg. And that's done. As you can see, there's no more egg pieces or no more egg texture over there. We go in with our next egg. And it's important to actually stay and watch this mixture. You don't want to pour your egg in and then move and leave it. You want to make sure that you mix it in together. Otherwise, it will form that skin at the top, and you don't want that. You want your egg to be fully incorporated into the dough that we're making over here. As you can see now, it's fully incorporated. And the reason why you want to keep adding your eggs is you want the dough to be quite, I'm not going to say runny, but quite pliable, quite usable. So you don't want it to be too runny, you don't want it to be a sauce. You basically want to be able to push this through your piping bag, and you don't want it to be so hard that you have to now work too hard. You want it to make it as simple as possible. We're not working hard here, we're working very smart. So we're incorporating the last egg, and by the looks of it, I might not need to add the next egg, but I'm just going to keep mixing because, like I mentioned, it is important to make sure you fully incorporate your egg before you move on to the next one. And like I mentioned to you earlier, I've got a pot of oil next to me here because we're making choux pastry, which you can make profiteroles, which is what we're making today. But I also want to give you a tip or a trick as well. The same dough that we're making here actually works perfectly for choux pastry that is used to make churros as well. So if you're perhaps feeling creative and you're like, I've made my profiteroles before and I want to take it up a notch and I want to show off to my friends and I want to do something else, you can actually use the very same dough or mixture to make churros. So as you can see, the mixture is done. I'm now going to start piping it into our into a piping bag. I'm moving over from my wooden spoon to my spatula, and this basically helps me with putting the mixture into the piping bag. You start off by making sure you create a cup with your hands, and then you put everything into the piping bag. Another thing is, once I've put this mixture into the piping bag, I'm not going to start putting everything into or rather, I'm not going to start baking it just yet. I'm going to put this into the fridge to chill, but luckily I have some of the mixture that we've made a little earlier, so we'll be able to use that. And this is how the mixture should look. It's nice and easy to use. It's nice and soft. As you can see, it's not sticking to my finger. It's because of that butter that we've got in there, and that's perfect. We take this, put it aside, let it chill. That's one step done. Now on to the next step, South Africa. We've got our tray over here that I've sprayed with some non-stick spray, and then I put some baking paper on there. This is to allow the paper to stick onto the tray. And then I've cut a hole onto my piping bag, and we're now going to start piping those profiteroles onto our baking tray. And all you do is just plop it out, and there we go. And then the next one, you can make them as big or as small as you like. And as you can see, it's not having a bit of a tail there. That's fine. That is because you chilled it. If you don't chill it, it's also going to be harder to maneuver and to use. So it is safer. Always chill it, and then it makes it easier for you to use it. Don't worry about that. And I just want to show you, because I have some that I've made a little earlier, but I just want to show you what happens now. I've got some leftover water here, and that base helps us to make or rather push down that tail, making sure that when these come out of the oven, they don't have a little head on the top there. You basically you just have a nice rounded surface. And then these are going to go into the oven. I'm going to brush them with a bit of egg wash. Go into the oven to bake at 220 degrees for about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on the size and also depending on the type of oven you have. And this is how they'd come out from the oven, nice and golden brown. I'm going to cut one open just so you can see exactly how they look inside. They're nice and fluffy and airy and eggy and delicious. But before I go into that, I just want to show you that churro that I was talking about. So we've got our oil nice and hot here. To make the churro, all you do is you spoon it into there, put your scissor into some oil. That helps you to cut it through. Plop it in there, some oil. And then you basically just keep going to make however many churros you want to make. And you've gone from one dish to 2 dishes with one recipe and the same amount of ingredients. So we'll let those fry up and get nice and golden brown. Now we're going to start filling our profiteroles, cut them in half. Some people like to fill them with cream patissier, which is basically custard cream. Some people like to fill them with whipped cream. Today, because we like we mentioned earlier, it's a dream with ice cream, we're filling them with our dairy-made country fresh vanilla ice cream. And the reason for that is because they're being sold as a combo in store right now. So you know that you're basically getting 2 for 1, which is the one thing I love about this Bliss dessert. The fact that you can use it as a filling, as a topping on your desserts. You can use it for pancakes, you can use it for waffles, you can use it for any basically use you prefer. And this is how they look, South Africa. You just fill them with your ice cream, top it with that delicious Clover Bliss on top, and that is your dessert ready to indulge. for anyone that loves these kind of desserts will definitely love you. So I'm just going to keep going. I'm just going to keep filling these up. And this is what I call a 2-for-1 special. This is called the double indulgence. And to get this recipe, all you need to do is go to afternoonexpress.co.za. But in case you missed it, here's a quick recap.
Made with love by Clover.